afternoon, everybody. Can y'all hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
Cool, thanks. As you can see here, I'm Mitch Parker. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer at Temple Health in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And today's presentation is on financial and policy challenges to effective information security for hospitals. Can you hear me without the microphone?
Yes.
Thank God. Let's start. The purpose of today's presentation is to show current compliance challenges to healthcare IT. We want to take a look and show that expected compliance is pretty much impossible on multiple levels. And we want to demonstrate that multiple government initiatives that they're intended to combat fraud, but instead they're impacting operations, physical plant, potentially patient care. And most importantly, we're going to talk about how we can work around these challenges and put together a good program. This is a hacker conference. We're here to hack the system. We're not here to complain about it. So, give you a little bit of my background. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer for Temple Health. It's an academic medical center and health system up in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I have extensive experience. I started off as a developer in Java many, many years ago. And I moved on to be a system administrator and then moved into information security. I'm currently an adjunct professor at Temple University Fox School of Business in their Information Technology Auditing and Cybersecurity program. I have my bachelor's in computer science, my master's in IT leadership, and I just got my MBA from Temple University. I'm also a CISSP, and the data in today's presentation has been submitted as part of a paper to the Journal of Health Information Management, a peer-reviewed journal from HIMSS. So let's start off with a little background here. In 2012, there were 5,723 registered hospitals in the United States. This is according to the American Hospital Association. The average profit margin on them is 7.04%. In other words, hospitals are not the kind of business you want to really invest in. 21.3% of them had negative total margins, meaning they lost everything. And 25.9% had negative operating margins. So what that means is that they're still making money, but they're losing it on basic hospital operations. So what does this mean? Over a quarter of the hospitals in the United States lose money on basic operations. That's a good chunk. And at 7.04%, that's average. Background in the situation we're dealing with right now is a pretty large fraud, waste, and abuse situation. Taking a look up here, the estimated amount of Medicare and healthcare fraud in the United States from multiple sources, and I got this from combining together about 10 different sources, is between $75 and $98 billion a year. That's a lot of money. Take a look at healthcare. Healthcare itself is 17.2% of our gross domestic product in the United States. To give you a comparison, financial services, which is our banks, the big financial companies, that's 7.9% of our gross domestic product. That means that healthcare right now does over double the business of banks. And retail's overall revenue loss from fraud, waste, and abuse is 0.54%. That means when you go on and you look on TV, you see the Target breach, you see the Michaels breach, you see all the other retail breaches. All those breaches add up to is 0.54% of total revenue. Healthcare's revenue loss from fraud, waste, and abuse is estimated at between 2.68 to 3.5%. That's in 2012 numbers, given their total gross domestic product, and a $2.8 trillion spend on healthcare. That's a very large number. And which one do we hear more about on the news? We hear about the big retail breaches. We're not hearing about healthcare, even though it's demonstrably significantly larger than retail. So the government's been pushing several large programs on an already strapped healthcare system in the United States with the intention of combating fraud, waste, and abuse. So here's our big six right now. Number one on the hit list right now is Obamacare, or as we call it, the Patient Privacy and Affordable Care Act. Meaningful Use, which is the government incentive program for electronic medical records. ICD-10, the International Code for Diseases version 10, that is the program that they have been implementing to basically change how we do coding and billing. Patient satisfaction. You might not think much of it, but when we get into the details, I'll explain more. RAC audits, which are recovery audit contractor. This is where the government basically hires third-party agencies to go in and take a look at your medical records and determine which ones are legitimate claims and which ones aren't. And finally, all their legislation, HIPAA, HITECH, HPACA, and the inconclusive enforcement of these three major ones.
So what do you mean by inconclusive enforcement?
They put laws out there, but what they haven't done, and I'll get into detail about this, is that they have put laws and regulations out there with no idea how they're actually going to enforce them.
That's what I thought.
So, first one, Obamacare. This law has several provisions which can cause your hospitals serious financial issues. First one that I pulled out was Section 6401. 6401 has a good part at first. It requires all healthcare providers to implement a compliance program. And it requires additional provider screening and fraud and background checks on both the government and provider side. So what these first two items are really good. You want your hospitals to have good compliance programs. You want the government to be doing additional checking on it. But on both the government and provider sides, because you don't want to be having fraud. You don't want to have fraud as a big part of your business. But the most important part of 6401 is CMS is going to have the ability now to basically take money from you, from your receivables, if they feel that you owe them money. So in other words, instead of going and having a payment plan, if they find that you owe them money for something, they'll just go, okay, we were set to pay you $2 million next month. So we think you owe us an additional $3 million, so we're just going to send you a bill for $1 million and call it even. So hospitals, which have gotten very good at cost accounting and financial accounting because of the limited financial constraints they're under, if your cash flow is dependent on getting a certain amount of money from CMS every month, and the government now has the authority to basically say that cash flow can go away and we can change it at will, this could be a very serious financial issue for your average hospital. This is why a lot of them, even though Obamacare does have its benefits, don't like it. And I can tell you that several hospitals in the Philadelphia area have already had that happen where money's been taken out and they said, sorry, take it up with our lawyers. Section 6402 is my other favorite one because they're going to be establishing a gigantic data warehouse of every claim, not only for Medicare and Medicaid, but also the Veterans Administration, which has had its own data security issues, the Department of Defense, that includes all the uniformed services, plus DoD civilian, federal old age and survivors programs, so in other words, like your railway insurance, so your coal miners insurance, and some of the programs that I believe were taken over from Pension Guarantee Benefit Corporation, your Indian health insurance from the Indian Health Service, and the state children's health insurance programs from all 50 states. And Section 6504 requires providers to report an expanded set of data elements for reporting fraud, waste, and abuse. So in other words, to get better at detecting fraud, waste, and abuse, they want more data from all the claims and from the government and from what they receive from you. That goes to here. While this has good intentions, there is no other way to unify this other than using Social Security numbers. Because the Omnibus Act of 1998, which was passed after HIPAA, cuts all federal funding for an ID number that is not a Social Security number. The rest of the world, starting with Canada and Europe and everywhere else, has a separate number for conducting healthcare business than regular business. So essentially what you're going to do is you're going to have a gigantic database out there eventually of every claim filed for government and private, and it's organized by Social Security number. So while this database is going to be good for detecting fraud, waste, and abuse, what happens if someone abuses that database? Look at what happened with the IRS last week. 100,000 records taken, and the method used to get that data was not. The method used for getting that data was knowledge-based. In other words, they use information they already had on people to get 100,000 records out of IRS's own database. What's going to happen is a malicious use of a database that has a significant amount of information already on it. That means that it's going to be easier than ever to do financial fraud. This is actually very dangerous. So I put the thing here, who watches the watchers? And the reason why? You're going to have that database out there. You're going to have to make sure that whoever has access to it has the best of intentions for doing so, or else you're going to be seeing a bigger privacy and security issue from the implementation of this database than anything else. And getting back to your point earlier about inconclusive enforcement, this is a case, pride case, where the government put something in legislation, got Congress to approve it, and did not think of the potential consequences. Because you're going to have that database out there. This is dangerous, to say the least. Now we get over to meaningful use. Meaningful use, as part of the High-Tech Act, it allocated incentive money to providers for successful implementation of electronic medical records under what they call the Meaningful Use Program. I've been doing about 3 or 4 risk assessments a year for meaningful use in the past 4 years. And what's ended up happening with meaningful use is this has ended up being pretty significant because as providers implement electronic medical record systems, they realized that everyone else, they had to implement more systems to be able to effectively use the medical record system. And we're talking radiology, laboratory, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If there's a medical specialty, there's a system that probably had to be upgraded to work with electronic medical records. So what this led to is that there's significantly higher costs. There was a study done in North Carolina of over 4 million discharges. And the cost per case, when you implement electronic medical records, rose by 7%. That might not seem like that much when you have a few million cases or you're at a hospital that does 60,000 discharges a year. That's a lot of money you're not seeing. And that's pretty much a haircut to your operating costs. And if you were operating positive before you had an electronic medical record, you're operating negative now. But the big reason why in the academic studies I looked at was that the true cost of getting the meaningful use payments was a lot higher than what people realized. Meaningful use dollars you got from the government only cover 20 to 25% of the actual cost of implementing an EMR system. And I can tell you from personal experience, that number's about right. And a failure of an EMR system is actually pretty huge. There have been providers that have gone out of business or been sold because they have not effectively implemented electronic medical records, or they've had a big failure in doing so. This is the kind of event that when it happens, the minimum you expect is a CEO to be fired. So there's been incentive to put in electronic medical records, but no communication of the true costs. Which brings us to meaningful use also requires good security risk assessment and follow-up on action items. Speaking as someone who's actually been audited on meaningful use, they do audit the risk assessments. And part of the security risk assessment they look for is continual monitoring of the system and all its components. And they want you to take a look for fraud, waste, and abuse. They're actually very specific about it. And multiple providers, including a lot that I know of, have been audited, and they've had their incentive money taken away due to this. Thankfully, our organization has not been one of those. Several in our area have been. But when the money gets taken away, again, I go back to Section 6401 of Obamacare. They just take the money out of your receivables. So you thought you were getting $6 million back from Medicare 1 month? No, you get 3. And you've got to make payroll. So this is significant. Also, EMR systems are huge, complex systems. Think SAP times 10. So delayed implementation delays the amount of money you get back from the government. Again, that's also significant, especially if your organization has counted on meaningful use revenue as part of the budget. They don't get it, you don't have money for other things, and things have to be cut. Unfortunately, a lot of the time that's people and that's projects that can help your organization out. So on top of all that, now you have additional costs for doing risk assessments and system monitoring. Because a lot of companies are making money these days.
I have 2 questions before we
Yes,
move on to the next
sure.
one. Meaningful use audit is checking to see that they use the incentive money for what it's supposed to be, right?
Meaningful use audit, in my experience, has been that you use the money for what it's supposed to be used, most importantly, that you conduct a risk assessment to ensure that the money is being used for what it's supposed to be used for. That you do your own internal checks and balances first, and that you implement the system according to CMS's own guidelines.
And without getting into specific names or anything like that, could you mention 2 or 3 of the biggest exceptions or inconsistencies you've found when you've done meaningful use audits?
I will tell you that it's been a continual checking of systems. That's been the biggest thing. You have to be able to, when you take a look at a system, set up policies, procedures, and process to have someone continue to look at the data in that system to make sure that you're continually abiding by the rules. And the second is policies and procedures. You have to have good supporting policies and procedures. And the third is the government actually wants a good incident response plan for your organization dealing with breaches and security threats. Yes?
I have 2 pieces of information I want to share. In Puerto Rico, hospitals receive 30% less of Medicare payments, and also the incentive program for this Medicare portion does not apply to Puerto Rico hospitals, only the Medicaid part. And still, Puerto Rico hospitals have to comply with meaningful use and all that. So they're even receiving less money, and they still have to comply.
So that's even worse.
Yes.
And I can tell you, speaking from my experience of actually done work in healthcare in Puerto Rico in the past, the fact is a significant portion of the healthcare providers in Puerto Rico already operate on shoestring budgets. So asking them to actually comply with all this is actually more of a financial challenge for your average hospital or healthcare system in Puerto Rico. And the ones I think that are the most successful at it have been the ones that, quite frankly, are not owned by entities in Puerto Rico that literally bring in their systems lock, stock, and barrel from somewhere else.
And also the non-profit hospitals.
And the nonprofits are the ones getting killed the most.
Yes.
Because, I mean, again, you depend on incentive payments, government payouts, and other items as part of your receivables, and legislation such as Obamacare gets put into place that allows the government to basically take money out of receivables without telling you. That's going to kill you. So any other questions before I move on? So we go over to ICD-10, talking about something else that everyone's going to have to implement before the end of the year. This is the upgrade of the medical billing and coding system for the International Code for Diseases from version 9 to version 10, which goes from about 17,000 billing codes to 87,000. It's huge. It requires changes to any system that can be used for medical billing and coding. It requires you to completely retrain your entire staff on medical billing and coding. And due to anticipated errors in medical billing and coding, your claims denial rate could shoot up from anywhere between 100 to 200%, and that's just an estimate. And there's also one other thing I did not put in here. There is the potential for organizations to face criminal penalties if said organization does not implement ICD-10 or receives money from the U.S. government. This was a fear that was communicated to me by a surgeon. So a big concern here is if you do not have significant good cash reserves, this is going to negatively impact your operations. Because what's going to end up happening with ICD-10 is you're going to have a few months where people are learning the system and dealing with claims denials, where you're going to basically have significantly reduced cash flow, which means less money for everything else. And also, add that fact, ICD-10 requires you to upgrade multiple systems at the same time. There's a lot of high upfront costs for that. There's a lot of high back-end costs for your cash reserves. So getting the patient satisfaction here, this is something a lot of people haven't thought about. This is a new program. It's called the HCAPS program. And it's being used to factor in the revenue because hospitals can be docked from 0.4 to 1% of their revenue based on bad patient satisfaction scores. So in other words, if someone fills out the Press Ganey survey in your hospital and says, "Hi, I did not have a good patient experience," what ends up happening, and it gets to Medicare, they can say, "Oh, by the way, because of such and such reporting this, we're going to dock you 1% of your revenue for the month."
Wow.
So a lot of hospitals have implemented programs to increase patient satisfaction. And this has taken a lot of forms. Number one, Smart TVs in hospitals. This is a trend that I've seen. There's been a company based out in New York that's been making a lot of money implementing smart TVs. Want to guess what version of Android they run? 2.3. Want to guess when the last time that's been patched? Exactly. So right now I can tell you I have a completely segmented network that has nothing but these little TVs on it. The other thing is free patient wireless. A lot of hospitals were designed when they put wireless in to have wireless. You have it for your wireless carts, you have it for your medical devices. Hospitals weren't designed to have wireless for patients. So what's happened is you have a significant cost of your IT infrastructure that's being allocated towards patient satisfaction through free wireless. Because you basically have to retool your wireless and segment it off so that instead of having your part for hospital business, you now have your part for people bringing whatever device they choose, connecting it to your network, and making sure so they can get onto the internet and do whatever they do when they're in the hospital.
Your microphone's working?
Microphone's working, but
Oh, okay.
it just sounded a little bit too weird.
Oh, okay, all right.
So people don't think of it as that much, but you're basically doubling or tripling the amount of wireless devices on your network. You know for a fact that these people don't have security patches on their stuff. And you have to do an extra degree of monitoring and restructuring of your network to make sure that those devices that are on the patient wireless can't see what's on the business side. So it's another huge hidden cost, all in the name of 1% of revenue. But anyone knows that when you do wireless, if you do wireless right, you're looking at probably 2 to 4% of your revenue for the first year being put to putting in a good wireless network in the first place that supports both patient operations and business operations. So, and you're also adding a significant amount of complexity to the network, and you're basically putting yourself at risk. So it's significant, and you got your revenue and the direct costs. And yes, for a disclaimer, we do run patient wireless. But this is the big one right here, recovery audit contractors. Because the government has such a big backlog because they have so few employees right now in reviewing claims, they've now opened it up to third parties. So with these recovery audit contractors, they're medical professionals employed by third-party contractors. They're collection agencies, basically. They're collection agencies. They can issue denials of any Medicare or Medicaid claim out there, and they get a cut of the percentage of the money they save the government. So they have good financial incentive for denying claims. But here's where the cost comes in. They can review the past 3 years of claims. They can audit 400 claims per 45-day period. And this can cause you adverse financial impact. We had a physical therapy chain in our area that lost 67 employees because they had to lay them off due to the cost of this. So think of what you have in your house. Think of your bills. Think of trying to find bills from 3 years ago. You have to do that. And if they issue denials on items for you, that's revenue they can take right out. And again, based on Obamacare, they can take that money out of your receivables. That means you get less money for something that happened 3 years ago, and you have to be able to appeal it. Well, here's the deal. When you try and appeal it, have you ever seen the movie Brazil? The bureaucracy in there? Right now, there's administrative law judges you can appeal these cases to. The wait for an administrative law judge for a recovery audit contractor to rule on whether a claim is valid or not is 2 years. And these audits, they're taking a significant amount of resources to handle because you have to pull medical professionals off of what they're doing to have them either respond to RAC questions or issue constructive responses as to why this claim should not be denied. That's pretty significant. So handling appeals and it's taking a lot of time and resources for people. Yes?
Yes, really, this sounds like bounty hunters where they can issue their own warrants.
What did you say?
Like bounty hunters who can issue their own warrants.
Yes, they can.
Does this really get money back that it was paid incorrectly, or just another bureaucratic mess?
Bureaucratic mess.
I guess.
It is, and what's happening is this is taking money from hospitals. And a big part of the reason why I wanted to take a little bit of a different approach today with this is because a lot of us with healthcare, we only see the effect that there's poor information security in healthcare. The big reason for this was to show here's a good monetary reason why why there's poor information security in healthcare. It's because basically there's no money. So with that, go to inconclusive laws. So I had to put there that HIPAA was a nice idea because the stance of the government has been, it's great to implement these laws, but we implemented them without really thinking about how to do so. Total compliance is really impossible to achieve. So I gave an example here of 45 CFR paragraph 164.308A2D, which is a review of information systems activity. As everybody knows, you cannot go line by line through Active Directory. You cannot go line by line through an EMR. If you have a patient that's been in a hospital for a couple weeks, they're going to have about 100,000 lines in their medical record. So even with automated tools and statistical sampling, I could have nothing but 2 full-time employees doing nothing but statistical sampling to show that to a 99% confidence level, plus or minus 7%, we've reviewed this many patients and are assured that we're doing things the right way. And these can't be low-level people. These can be pretty high-level people to have them go through these records. And that's all they're going to do for a few years. And even with these tools, even with the statistical sampling, these breaches still happen. I put the case of Memorial Hermann in Texas here because there was a doctor at Memorial Hermann. Even though they had fraud detection tools in place, I believe it was over 21,000 medical records that guy accessed over an 11-year period, undetected. In other words, he was able to do what he did. No one knew what he was doing until they, from other reasons, the U.S. Attorney's Office found the data somewhere else. That's significant. So again, this comes back to our laws being a nice idea, but sometimes unenforceable in practice. So now we go to inclusive explanations of laws. There's been little clarity given by CMS as to the nuances of a HIPAA security rule. So providers have basically been told to figure it out for themselves and train their workforce. I can tell you, I have gone to conferences in DC. I've actually spoken with CMS. I've spoken with a number of their officials. And that's pretty much been the explanation that myself and other people in my position have been given. And copies of my paper, which I'll make available once it's published, have in there exactly where and when and who sends. So CMS provides one dedicated resource for the HIPAA privacy and security role in each of their regional centers. There's 10 of them in the United States. Last, according to the American Hospital Association, there are 5,723 registered hospitals. Plus, there are a number of smaller providers and physician practices. So essentially, you have 10 people that can swing the HIPAA security rule to tens of thousands of practices and hospitals. So this has led to the creation of an industry that pretty much does nothing but interpret HIPAA, but they're not the governments. And to add insult to injury, they recently announced that they're going to be stepping up provider audits in fiscal 2015 and fiscal 2016. And they're talking about doing several hundred audits a year using third-party CPA firms. Again, we know we had a CPA firm do a desk site audit of us in 2013. And it was not pleasant. It passed, but it wasn't pleasant. So right now, I can tell you I've been getting a significant amount of email from vendors basically trying to scare me into using their software to comply with HIPAA. I can flat out tell you that implementing that software is not going to get you past the CMS audits. I've been audited. They go for the risk assessments, policies and procedures, and your incident response. They're not going to go for, did you implement such and such piece of software? Unfortunately, the mindset a lot of people have is they want to pay to make it go away. Unfortunately, you really can't do that when you get audited by the government.
I had a client who was approached by a vendor to sell an IPA solution. And they told my client that they had already pre-canned rules in there to monitor. And that's not the case. You have to configure the rules specifically to each entity or organization.
That's
So
correct.
there's a lot of vendors out there selling solutions, like a one-click solution, and that's not the
That's-
reality.
That's not the case. I'm not gonna name the name of the vendor, but I can tell you that 4 healthcare providers in my area spend upwards of $1 million each on a solution. You know what they use it for? Pulling logs from Epic.
Epic, yeah.
So what I did is we're doing an inpatient Epic implementation now. So what I did is I went to the people doing Epic reporting on our Epic build and I said, hi, can you make it easy for me to pull logs from when the government calls? We solved that problem in 30 minutes. Because, again, the truth is, a lot of vendors, they make their bread and butter by trying to sell you these solutions saying you'll be HIPAA compliant. You're not going to be HIPAA compliant. Ask Memorial Hermann how much money they're going to be paying the government for that violation. That's a large, profitable health system in Texas that's just not going to be as profitable due to that gigantic breach. So it comes down to actually doing something that's enforceable. And again, when CMS made that announcement last week that they're going to be stepping up audits, right on cue, I had 2 or 3 vendors in my inbox telling me, oh, we can help you with this. No, you can't. So what are the effects of this? Number one, I actually took a look at the age of the physical plant in hospitals, and it's actually gone up. That means instead of buying things like beds, buildings, or ambulances or other items like that, we're spending the money elsewhere. This means that hospitals aren't replacing capital equipment due to the decreased capital to do so. Right now, there's a big fight on Capitol Hill over ICD-10 because a lot of organizations, quite frankly, can't afford it. More and more to get into it, they realize it's almost impossible to achieve. And the American Hospital Association, which is the biggest group in Washington advocating for this, they've been relentless in this because they realize what an effect this can have on providers. Which means that hospitals are picking and choosing exactly what to implement, and they're not doing it on compliance, they're doing it based on what they can afford. And the IT departments are being completely stretched to the limits to accommodate all these legacy systems and the new systems. And any budget you have for new initiatives, because of these 6 things I just mentioned, is pretty much going away. So now we get to the good part, where we talk about what we can actually do about this. How can we hack the system to do it better for us? So this is what we've been doing. Number 1, understand the environment. Number 2, understand the law. Number 3, find your collaborators. Number 4, implement reasonable security plans. Number 5, continually assess your risk. And finally, start all over again. So understand your environment. You have to find out who does what in your environment. And with IT, one of the big things that we found, especially when I started at Temple, is that IT was kind of pigeonholed off into a corner. You really didn't communicate much with the rest of the organization. So that was one big thing that I worked to change. Because you got to find out who the key people really are. And they're not going to be the people you think they are. They really aren't. You're going to find that you're going to get more collaboration out of an administrative assistant who can get you on the CEO's calendar or get things in front of the CEO than you will somebody that has some big job title who no one likes anyway. Or that some person who you don't think has a big role because their job title is kind of small, they have a big role. And you want to be friends with these people. And you want to find out what they need. You really want to find out what they need because everybody has needs, especially in healthcare, because nobody has budget. Everyone's stretched to the limits. And you want to see how an information security or IT can help fulfill that need. Because again, you're going to be able to do so. And you want to make yourself visible. So there's a lot of committees in hospitals. There's a lot of committees in organizations. You want to be out there and talking to people. And this is something that takes a lot of work, takes a lot of practice to do, but it's well worth it in the end. And more importantly, this is something that has been kind of anathema to a lot of healthcare organizations. Find friends in other organizations. Traditionally, the healthcare market, especially in the United States, has been very weak in this area. There's been a lot of mindset of don't talk outside the box or don't make friends with other people. I can tell you that's exactly how my organization was several years ago. And again, this is something we've worked to change because security is everybody's problem. And I'm speaking off the record here, but I can tell you about 3 direct threats that I have sent our CIO and other people in my organization based on information I've received from other local Philadelphia area organizations. And I have come out and told my CIO, this came from so-and-so, or this came from so-and-so. One led to a warning that we sent to the entire workforce about a spear phishing incident. One was a supply chain incident, specifically targeting suppliers, and the other was of a data breach that was not reported in the news. But the truth is, we collaborate, we get information, we get it in front of the right people now. This is something that we've been able to focus on because I'm going to have a little caveat here. There's a lot of people that will sell you threat intelligence services, but there's a lot of opportunities for collaboration. And here in Puerto Rico, there's a very good InfoGuard chapter. There's ISA down here, and there's other organizations. You can meet up, you network with people, you start talking about threats. Because nothing gets your boss's attention better than you actually delivering information on specific targeted threats. That's what did it for us. When I told my CIO that there was a specific spear phishing attack out there that was attacking people that caused another organization, a competitor of ours, to have 6 people have their payroll accounts switched from their bank account to somebody else's due to a phishing attack, that got people's attention. You get attention with paychecks. Understand the law. I cannot stress how important this is because everybody has their own idea of interpretation of what HIPAA is. So they've made dealing with regulations very confusing. They've made a lot of lawyers and consulting firms a lot of money. And when you throw in the Joint Commission, who is one of the big accrediting agencies for hospitals across the world, you're even worse off. So what you want to do is, I know it might be difficult, take the time to read and understand the applicable laws out there. Understand what they are. Because unlike school, there will be pop quizzes. You will be questioned, and it will be from higher-ups. I can give a perfect example of this. We put in passwords on our smartphones 5 years ago. And within 8 hours of us turning it on, I had an email in my inbox from a CEO. CEO asked me, why are we doing this? And I responded with 4 different parts of HIPAA as to why we did it. After that, there were no questions from the CEO. So understanding the law is very important because there's a lot of people out there that will try and tell you what HIPAA is or what high-tech is or what meaningful use is. You have to, or what Obamacare is. You have to understand it for yourself because they're going to ask you. And unlike a pop quiz, it's not going to be points off your academic record. It's your job.
It's your job.
You have to understand. It is your job. You have to understand this. But also, you have to be able to clearly communicate this to other people. So when people go, well, why do I have to do this? This is why. This law says so. And if we don't do this, we're going to be opening ourselves up to risk. This is the risk we're opening ourselves up to. So it is in our best interest to do this. And the 2 things to keep in mind, people will not implement what they do not know. And people will also not implement what doesn't apply, what they do not think applies to them. So if they don't know what it is, they don't think it applies to them, they're not going to waste time and money to do it. That's basic human nature. So you have to be able to clearly communicate, this is what it is, this is why it applies to you, and this is why you need to implement it. Another important part here is find collaborators. Everybody's got limited resources. So what you want to do is you want to find people that are suffering the same types of problems that you are. You want to communicate what your shared issues are. You want to work together to solve those issues at the same time. So in other words, instead of having 2 different initiatives, you have one. And you want to, and by doing this, you want to show you can provide value. I'm going to give a perfect example of this. Our organization does not have a cybersecurity response plan. And I'll tell you why. Because we have an incident response plan that addresses cybersecurity as part of it. Because what ended up happening is we realized that hospitals in the United States, I don't know if this applies to Puerto Rico here, if anyone can apply this, can educate me, if you get money from FEMA, you have to demonstrate that you have a good emergency response plan. We didn't see the value of having 2 different emergency response plans, especially since we're getting federal funding to do one already. So what we did is, we figured out that FEMA's paying us, and FEMA's requiring us to certify staff on the incident response plan. If we throw something different in there to say, okay, now I have to train every executive, not only on the incident response plan, but I have to train them on cybersecurity. One's getting money, one's getting funded by the government, and one I have to do, and the other I kind of don't. Which one are they going to do? So we rolled everything up into our organization's incident response plan. So if there's an incident, it gets handled by the organization's plan, which also leads to the benefit of having a large amount of executives and management that are already trained in how to respond. So that's an example of that. Another big example is anything dealing with regulatory compliance. What we ended up finding is that when you have to comply with Joint Commission and HIPAA, is that a lot of them are one and the same. So if you can bundle your responses and get some support from your health information management and regulatory compliance groups, you don't have to hire your own people to do it. You can work together. So in other words, you save money by working together and working on shared issues. And this comes to implementing reasonable security plans. This gives you a chance when you're doing less work by eliminating duplication to implement plans that have project plans and documentation, system testing, user acceptance testing, and a clear tie back to compliance and regulatory. And you have to be able to defend that tie back. You don't want to depend on products to do what a good project plan could do for you in the first place. I'm going to speak firsthand about being audited by the government. They look for that project plan more than they would did you implement such and such a product. Because the first thing the government wants to see if they audit you and there's a deficiency is what's your plan to resolve it? Is it reasonable? Can it be done in a decent time period? And is it actually physically possible? Because if you say I'm going to implement encryption on every desktop in a week, you're not going to do it. It's going to get rolled back. Or if you say, oh, I'm going to do this in such and such a date, it's probably not going to happen. You have to be reasonable about it. You have to think about it. And unfortunately, we don't see a lot of that happening these days. And a big part of this is continually assessing risk. As a healthcare organization covered under HIPAA, you are required to do a periodic risk assessment. Their guidance has been at least yearly. And one area they've actually been pretty good on is publishing a system readiness assessment up on the internet. We've actually incorporated a good chunk of it into our annual risk assessment for meaningful use. You want to fill this out at least yearly, but here's the important part, here's the key. Again, as part of being audited last year by the government, we had to submit our risk assessments and our open items to the government. And they reviewed our risk assessment. This is good for us because we got a free review of our risk assessments, but on the other hand, you have to actually address your open items. And I can tell you in December, after submitting a meaningful use risk assessment to a CEO, the first comment the CEO made is, do you think you guys are going to actually be able to implement measures to close these open items? So you have to continually follow up on these open items throughout the year because the people up top expect you to. And you will not be able to close every open item. You just can't. I can flat out tell you that we have 2 systems we're doing meaningful use risk assessments for that use Java. That I will not be able to close within this year because they use Java. But as long as you demonstrate effort, document it, God forbid you get audited, you'll be able to at least show you've made a best effort, and they'll usually leave you alone for that. And you don't need a third-party firm to do this or to demonstrate compliance. You just don't. But you need to follow up, and you need to do the risk assessment. If there's anything you leave here today with, you don't have to hire a firm to do it. You can do it on your own. Get the risk assessment done so you understand what your strengths and weaknesses are. Another big item here that a lot of people don't really think about is change management. A lot of organizations do things ad hoc. change management is a very key item for organizations these days. It's not some new hot item. It's been out there for 30 years. Heck, the Project Management Institute has built a practice around it, and the U.S. military has been doing it for 50 years. So change management is key, it's important. You have to do it.
What is it?
Change management, basically the process and science of taking a look at every change in your organization, documenting it, assessing the risk, assessing the impact, and judging whether that change can go forward or not based on the risk and impact. And we have a weekly change management call at my place. We have to have that call because we have so many changes that occur. But again, what you want to do, give you an example. Somebody wanted to push out a change a couple weeks ago on citrus. A change that would have, had it been implemented, caused 700 calls to our help desk. Because people would have been wondering what our information was. So through effective change management and evaluating the change, our help desk people and myself were able to determine this is not going to be a good change because it's going to cause a huge amount of help desk calls, which is going to disrupt operations and disrupt about 5 other projects. Let's delay that change until we can get a good communication plan together and effectively tell users this is what's going to happen so we can reduce the amount of calls. For an example of that is if you change management, and this is, it comes mostly from the software world, you take a software module, you don't test it right, you put it in place, and it breaks everything, that's not good change management. Now, taking the test plan and showing you tested under these 15 different scenarios and tested it with code in a sandbox environment, then promoting it, that's good change management. So, brings us to our next item, which is vendor management. Vendors have been traditionally a weak spot, especially in healthcare. Under Obamacare, you have to do this anyway. But one of the big things we've started doing is grilling our vendors and making sure they understand our security rules. Make sure that we know security matters and that we're not going to sit there and do what they say. And that when we do something, we want it done the right way. And we want them to give us the secure configurations and them to do the work to show that they can meet our security standards. So in other words, it's not accepting blindly what they tell you. You tell them, this is what I want, these are my standards, these are laws that apply to me. Now you demonstrate to me how you're going to do it. And I'm going to give another example of what happens. We had a vendor in my area try and sell us something running Windows XP last year. Biomedical devices. And I'm going to tell you that the vendor actually came out and said, oh, by the way, we're at 2 other hospitals in your area. The first words out of my mouth were, I'm going to call the security officers at these other 2 healthcare institutions and tell them that you're running Windows XP on their network. So what I'd like you to do is you're going to tell me what your project timeline is for getting this on Windows 7, because until you get it on Windows 7, you're not going on my network. 6 weeks later, I had the vendor in our director of biomed's office with a timeline for Windows 7. And he promised that they were going to implement that Windows XP would not be touching our network. This is an example of that. A few weeks ago, I had somebody trying to push through a biomedical device on me running XP embedded. I have a phone call with that vendor's security officer to review why my organization and organizations like mine will not be putting anything running Windows XP on our network, or putting something that's unsupported on our network, or something that cannot be patched on our network. So you got to take the bull by the horns, because you know what? You put something like this on a network, what ends up happening is that thing gets infected, gets some malware on it, and a lot of your operational costs of money go up because you're not having good change control, and the vendors, you don't let them run your network. You don't let them run your network. It's your network to protect. You do what you have to do. And you assess the risk, and if it's too much of a risk, you stand up and say, no, until you mitigate the risk, you're off. But here's a caveat. You got to start all over again. Security is a continually evolving process, and your organization is continually evolving. And here's something a lot of people don't realize at the top. The people in power now will not be there in 4 years. I guarantee it. To give you an example, I just got an audit report from my internal audit team. 80% of the people that were on that audit report started in 2011 or later. I started in 2008. Compared to these people in this organization, I'm the old man. There were 4 names I recognized on that list. Everyone else is brand new. Every 4 years, you're going to see the same thing. And the average career of a C-level executive in the United States is very short. You're not going to be at the same company for a long time. These people make a habit of jumping ship every 2 to 3 years. In the Philadelphia market, it's about 3 years, and they'll go to and they'll bounce between one of 7 different organizations. Now 6, because 2 of them just merged. But literally, you run into the same people in different organizations. You switch between them continually. It happens. So you need to continually demonstrate your value and credibility. And you're going to have to continually do this. And what's even funnier is the security models everything's based on, they ask you to do that all the time anyway. So with that, we have 3 big takeaways for today. First big one is that your revenue of your average healthcare organization is continually under attack. We talked about the 6 different ways it is under attack. And we talked about how CMS continually implements initiatives that just drain your capital and operational expenses. But more importantly, we talked about the solution, which is to collaborate, find shared initiatives, plan, and continually assess risk, which is most important. So with that, does anybody have any questions?
I have one. Why is it that the money for the hospitals, considering all the money that is spent for health reasons in the U.S., is so low? I mean, can you answer that? I mean, why is it the hospitals are not getting more money when there's so much thousands of billions of dollars being spent? The profit.
I can tell you it's because there's a lot of initiative, because healthcare, because it's such a large part of the GDP, is under continual attack because they think that people are wasting money a lot more than they really are. I mean, there is a significant amount of fraud, waste, and abuse. But what ends up happening is they put these initiatives in place. They don't think about the impact of the initiatives. So you put these measures in place thinking that you're going to be cutting fraud, waste, and abuse, and you end up cutting a lot of legitimate business.
So it's being spent someplace else.
Being spent someplace else. Yes? Any other questions? Thank you all very much for your time.
Excellent presentation.
Excellent.
Yep.
Really good.